I think the question, who am I, is such a profound and beautiful place to start any kind of life transformation process. You might have asked it many, many times before and even answered it a couple of times to some or another degree. But as you mature, develop, become more conscious through life, the question of who am I only runs deeper and deeper. We never really answer the question. However, we grow in our understanding of who we are all the time. So it's something to contemplate and look at again. Who am I really? Without my story, without all the conflict, without all the trauma, without all the distractions and drama. Who am I really? Who have I become? So that is a really good place to start. So we all know that we have a persona, and that personality is something that tends to drive us almost on automatic. Our attitudes, thoughts, perceptions, traits, all of these things have developed into a personality that leads us around operating in the past. And often when we're doing that, we stagnate, we don't grow, and naturally suffering comes to level us up, to spiral us up towards another level of life, understanding who we really are and understanding how life works. Never forgetting who you are is something that's so important, because whenever suffering and trouble comes, you fall back instantly onto the anchor of who you really think you are. For example, if you have low self-esteem and trouble comes, or trying times, you're really going to fall back onto that low self-esteem and operate from that level. But if you know who you really are, as someone who is a spiritual being, who is a divine, connected, growing person that contributes and has purpose and meaning in this life, then you'll be okay. But that's not always that easy to remember, especially in trying times. In trying times, we tend to forget who we really are. When times are good, we also tend to sit back, coast along, and sort of drift forward without having to rock the boat too much. We then forget who we are when trouble comes. Like a thief in the night, trouble will come, and that's going to happen to all of us. And when we do that, we normally jump in to, yes, you've heard it, flight, fight, freeze, needs of the personality. People don't just relapse. This is a process. Relapse is a process like everything else. What you got to understand is people don't just walk up, if alcohol is their thing, find a bottle and down it. It's deeper than that. And this is why we've discovered that working on recovery, we need to be wide awake, fully conscious at all times. And if we jump into that monkey mind, where we're just allowing our habitual attitudes, thoughts, perceptions, and things to manage who we think we are, we're not going to get very far. And you can fall into relapse again and again and again. However, if you remember who you really are, you might be able to change that process entirely. So relapse happens spiritually first. It happens spiritually first, then it happens emotionally, then you have a psychological relapse, and then you have a physical relapse where you go back to old behaviors, doing things that didn't work for you ever in the first place. You find yourself doing those things again, but it's been a process, a spiritual, emotional, psychological, and then physical process. So what you can do with relapse is plug it up at all these levels, never forgetting who you are. If you drop that spiritual connection and you find yourself not being able to cope emotionally, being impulsive with your emotions, understand that you've had a spiritual relapse, which is disconnecting from who you really are, all facets of yourself, the success, the failure, the ego side, the spiritual side, and so on and so forth. Those things disconnect and we have a spiritual relapse until we re-look again at a meeting with a psychologist, whatever it's going to be, and re-look and reconnect spiritually to who we are and to what everything else is, and we be like everything else, which is running at one pace, doing the same thing, everything's contributing, and getting that understanding back. So if we fall into emotions like resentment, we know it's the number one offender, we're in trouble. Get out of it and get back into a spiritual solution. If you don't handle your emotions, you're going to go into a psychological relapse. Usually, always in my opinion, usually this will begin with overthinking. Obsessive thoughts, when that mind starts to speed up and it's looking for solutions within the mind, you're not going to find it. The spiritual solution is definitely not in this crazy mind of ours that can run rampant in an hour, in a minute, in an instant. If it's left unmanaged, then it'll become unmanageable. So we need to manage this mind, and we do so by managing our emotions, understanding how we feel, speaking about how we feel, and then gaining that spiritual connection. If we don't do that, the mind becomes unmanageable. Things like losing your sleep cycle, becoming irritable, grumpy, cutting yourself off, isolating. All of these things happen with overthinking when our mind cannot find these solutions. Probably most of them we don't even need. Solutions to problems that we're looking to try and fix, that might even be problems that we shouldn't be concentrating on in the first place. So be aware of that psychology, because when you go into that psychological relapse, you're close to coming to a physical relapse. Now, of course, physical relapse is when someone who is an alcoholic picks up a bottle and takes a sip and starts that allergy, that obsession, that compulsion cycle that's always going to end in despair and suffering. Okay, so understand that you can plug it up by not drinking, but making sure that you don't have a psychological relapse, an emotional relapse, or a spiritual relapse. So those are literally the 4 warning signs that we can live by. Learn how to keep all 4 facets of yourself connected to a bigger picture. And the bigger picture is growth, contribution, understanding the awakened life is not one of doom and gloom, with victim mentality, with judgmental mentality, all of these things, resentments, not cleaning house, letting your ethics and morals go down the drain because you want to get back at someone. All of those things are states of the relapse cycle. And once you're in that, you need to get out of it as fast as you can. So remember who you are. It's not just the psychological person who can't get out of the thinking. You're not just an emotionally unmanageable, anxious, or depressed person. No, you're more than that. You're a spiritual being having this human experience where you're 4. And it ain't easy, but you can live a very, very good life. In fact, you can be better than well. Just remember that it is a spiritual solution that you're given. It's a spiritual solution, so don't lose that spiritual connection. You're not just a human being having a spiritual experience. I think you're rather, as Tilya Dijadin said, you're rather a spiritual being having a human experience. And this is what we mean by human. We can easily get stuck in what we can see, touch, taste, smell. It's those 5 senses. And when we're in those, we're not thinking with a contemplative mind. So use what I call your contemplative intelligence to stay open, stay connected, stay clean.